Hello! Today I'm going to give you some ideas of how to dress the 1/12 scale cupboard from the Messy Garden Shed project. So I've dressed mine with lots of decorating supplies, and the owners of this shed are rather messy. They don't clean up after themselves. So all the brushes and the paint pads are still covered in paint. There's a box underneath there with wallpaper and a messy decorating sheet, some extra rolls of paper and tins of paint, and all of these tins and things I made for the craft shed project that we did, so I'll link that below. And I'll be adding some more to this unit at a later stage when I make the little shelf to go above it. I'll tell you what we need as we go along, and I'll also give sizes as we go along in both millimetres and inches. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to start out by making a cardboard box just to sit inside this unit, and I'm using this manila card, which you can buy in A4 sheets. Just search manila card on somewhere like eBay and you should be able to find that, and it's got a lovely texture to it as well. And I've measured precisely so that the box will fit in there, so it'll tuck behind this door inside, and I want a little bit of a gap left here at this end because I'll be standing some paint tins and things in there. So I've done it 30mm wide, so that will be your side flaps. And I did a tutorial on making cardboard boxes as part of the Craft Shed series, so I won't go into the whole thing again, but you can look back at that video, and I'll link that below as well if you want to have a go at making your own cardboard boxes. But the measurements I've used are 30mm for the long sides, and then 18mm for the shorter sides, and then you need to add on that extra bit at the top and bottom for your flaps, and I've just done that 10mm high. So let me just give you those measurements in inches, and when I give you the inch measurement I'm always using the conversion chart that comes in each of my books, because I do actually work in millimetres because I find it easier, but you might work in inches. And the 30mm, so for the long side, is 1 3/16 of an inch, and the 18mm for the shorter side is 45/64 of an inch, and then the flaps 10mm is 25/64 of an inch. Just put that back, and then I show you all of this in that other tutorial, but I'll just go quickly through it. I like to just bend the box at each of the seams, along each of the edges, and this just makes it easier when you're folding it together. And don't forget to cut your little end flap, and that's for sticking the actual thing together. And also fold over the top flaps, or the lid parts, the lid and base parts. And this is actually going to be the outside of my box. Now I've got more of a sort of texture on the inside, but that's where I've drawn my line, so that's the bit I'm going to be folding in. So you just want to apply a little bit of glue to the flap. Glue that together, get your fingers inside to really press it together. And what you can actually do is lay it onto your work surface like that. Just move the shed out of the way, sitting in front of my drawers. And then using a spare piece of strip wood, pop that inside and press it down. So you're applying more pressure to the join that way, like that. Just square it off, and then you can fold in your flaps. And then I'm going to put a little bit of glue on those smaller flaps. Again, press those down. The strip fits in there better than my finger, so using that again to press the glue down. And then I'm going to fold in that flap at the back there. Squeeze that in. And then this one I want open. So I'm actually going to glue that down, but first of all I just want to tear a little bit out of it. Like that maybe. Tear it like that, leave it kind of jaggedy. And I'm just going to stick that down. I'm also going to stick down that one on the inside. And then that one as well I'm going to stick down because that will be seen. I think I'm just going to fold that one. And again, hardly any of this will be seen, you know, from looking into the shed, but it's just all those little details. You never know what might catch somebody's eye. I'm going to stick that down as well, and I'm actually going to stick that little flap up so that it stays where I want it. And then that will be going inside my cupboard, and it is a little bit of a tight squeeze. It'll go in like that, and then I'll tuck it down there just a little bit. And I'm going to be displaying some things in the box, and I'll have a few things standing down there. And one of the things I want to put inside the box are some old wallpaper rolls. So this is what I found online. Look at those. Now, I searched for vintage wallpaper, and this is what it brought up. And I can actually remember paper similar to this in my grandmother's house. These big old 1970s sort of prints, lots of orange and brown, and I've just printed off some blue as well just to cause a bit of contrast. Now I've done enough for 6 rolls, but I might not use all of those, so I'm going to cut those out. So when I sized these images, I did them the height 12th scale of an actual roll of wallpaper, which is about 1/2 metre high, but I've trimmed them down a bit because I obviously want them to fit inside the cupboard there. So to actually roll those up, you can start by rolling them around a cocktail stick. That. Just very carefully remove the cocktail stick, and then you can glue down the flap. I don't want to glue it all down. I'm going to fold a little bit over at the top. Like that. Just pop that in there. Now I'm going to do them all, even if I don't use them all. I could just lay one down somewhere, maybe even on top of the unit. And always try and be random as well, so don't do the same thing with every sheet. Some might have been rolled back up neatly, others wouldn't have. Okay, so I want to add a dust sheet into the bottom of my box, so I've just cut a piece here, I don't know, probably 3.5 inches square, and just make sure first of all that it does actually fit into the box. Sort of in there like that, and a bit hanging over the front. And then I want to have 3 of the rolls tucked in this end. So make sure it fits first, and that does. And if I want it a bit higher, I can always put a piece of kitchen towel to line the box first. Take work that out. And then you might have seen me do this with the old cloth for the step ladder, which was the last project. So just a bowl of cold tea, just put the tea bag in there for a minute or so, took it out, let it cool down, and I just want to soak this in there for about a minute or so. So push it in so it gets covered, and then leave that to soak for about a minute or two. After a couple of minutes, just give it a swish around and lift it out, and then just sort of rinse out the excess tea like that, and then leave that to dry. So if you've got a nice warm day, you can go and hang it out on the line, but it's still sort of quite cold here, so I'm going to hang it over the radiator. Now, I don't want to get rid of this bowl of tea yet, because I've also got some newspapers here which I want to age in the same way. And I found these again on Google, so I just searched for newspaper cover page, and then you get this sort of double page spread. So it doesn't really matter that it's not the back and front of a newspaper, because people aren't really going to be able to see that. And I've printed a few of each because they're going to be sort of stacked up, so you don't need to do them all different, but do try and get a few different covers in there so you've got a bit of different colour showing. And let me just remind you of the height of these. So if you're resizing them in a program such as Photoshop or something, go for a height of around about 40mm or 1.5 inches, and then that will give you a width of about 2.5 inches or 65mm, which is about right when they're folded in half. And all newspapers are slightly different sizes, so you can go a little bit larger and a little bit smaller as well. So I'll just cut these out. With paper, you don't need to leave them in as long, else you'll find that your paper may start to rip. So all you really need to do is dip them in and then take them straight out. And I've got one of my old plastic trays here, and I'm just going to lay them over the edge like that to dry. And because it's plastic, obviously they won't stick to it. My piece of fabric has been drying overnight now, and it's lovely and tea stained and a little bit crispy as well. And I'm going to add some paint splatters to it using these little sample pots of emulsion paint, and this is a similar technique that I used to make the little paint splattered rag that we hung on the step ladder, if you saw that video. So I've got some torn pieces of upholstery foam here which I'm going to use to dab the paint on. And I'll start with the white, and I'm just going to dab the sponge on there and then just randomly onto the cloth. Okay, so I'm now going to leave that to dry. I also left my newspapers drying overnight, and as you can see they've also gone all lovely and crispy and got that nice sort of brown aged tinge to them. So I've sort of started folding them in half, putting a few dog-eared pages in and what have you, and I want to fill this sort of empty drawer section here of the unit with papers. So see how many I can get in there. I don't want them hanging out too much. I'm going to sort of fold that back bit over as well. Let me get a couple more in there. And I want to save some of these as well for other areas of the shed. I want one to go on top of here with a sort of tin of paint and an unwashed paintbrush on it. That one can just be sticking on the top like that. Yeah, I like that. So I'm going to pull those out now and glue those together. Move those ones out of the way. You can ruffle them up a little bit more now they're glued together. And I'll glue them actually into the unit. I'm just going to use my smaller ball and just use that to press the glue down in there. And I think I'm just going to put a couple more in there as well, like that. And then I just want to add a little bit of age into this box. And to do that I've got these chalk pastels. So use a piece of scrap paper or card and just rub a couple of colours onto it just to get some chalk dust. Use that sort of charcoal grey, bit of brown, nice sort of greeny brown there, nice muddy colour. And I'm going to use a piece of sponge again to apply these, and I want to mix them up. And I'm sort of pushing it up under that flap so that it catches under there. It's just this sort of front edge and this side that's going to be seen, so I'm concentrating on those areas. Just stops it from looking so sort of new and pristine. So I'm going to glue one of each roll into the box on there, and I just want them sort of sticking in this front corner. Apply glue to the roll. I want that one so you can see the fold at the front. Like that. And then my piece of fabric is now dry, so I just want to sort of screw that up. And I just want to sort of find the right position first, because I want that sort of hanging over the side. I'll cut some of those threads off because they look a little bit too big for 12 scale. So I'm going to put a little bit of kitchen towel into the bottom of the box first, just to give it a little bit more height. And just press that into the bottom of the box. Snip off some of those loose strands. And sort of press that in there like that, and I want it sort of flat across the top of the box like that. So I'm going to glue this flap over the edge. And I don't want it to sort of tuck behind the door because there won't be enough room, so I'm trying to keep it towards this edge of the box. And then I just want to bring back in that sheet and a bit of sponge with the dust on, and I just want to add a little bit to the wallpaper rolls as they look a little bit too new and clean on those sort of folded parts. Like that. And I've just cut a tiny little bit of yellow sponge here from a sponge scourer, and I'm going to stick that in on top of the cloth there. That will just be sort of peeping out of the door. Okay, so I'll put a little bit of glue on the bottom of the box and just glue it into place now. Just squeeze that in there, push it along. And then press it down. Try and get my finger in there and press it down that side. And then I want to glue a couple of these remaining rolls into the back there, and I'll keep one aside because I might just put one on top. Like that. And then I've got a little box that I've had inside the shed there that I'm actually going to glue into this little gap, and then I'm going to put a tin of paint on top. And I'm just using this little box because I want to add a bit of height. And that can sit there at a bit of an angle. I've made a couple of little paint pots here, and I'm going to glue those into place on top of that little box. And I'll have the taller one so that it's standing at the back. And it helps to use tweezers when you're sort of positioning things in sort of little spaces where it's hard to get to. Stand that one back there. And I'll have this one at the front here. And I've actually done a tutorial for all these sort of little paint pots and things, and that was part of the Craft Shed series. And again, I'll put a link to the Craft Shed series below because there's a lot that I'll be doing for this shed that I did in there. Just get rid of that excess glue. And I sort of dirtied up that box as well with a bit of the chalk pastel. So that's the inside of the cupboard done. And now I want to move on to the top. We're going to start by making a really simple little paint tray and some sponge pads for the top of the unit. So for the paint tray, use the thinnest wood that you've got, and I'm using a 0.8mm thick sheet wood, and that's 1/32 of an inch. And for the base part, you want to cut a piece measuring 23mm by 20mm. And that's 29/32 by 25/32 of an inch. The sides are 23mm by 7mm, and that's 29/32 by 9/32 of an inch. And then for the front and back pieces, you want to cut two pieces measuring 22mm by 7mm, and that's 55/64 by 9/32 of an inch. And to construct that part, you want to begin by applying glue along each long edge of the base piece. Glue's starting to go a little bit dry. Pop that back down on your work surface and attach the side pieces. Press them into place so that the front and back of each piece is flush with the front and back of the base. And then you can use your spare piece of strip wood like that, just to press those against the edges of the base. Pull the sides into an upright position as you're doing it. Just push that along to make sure it's not sticking to your work surface, and then I just want to let that dry off for a moment before I pick it up to attach the front and back pieces. So once it's dried off a little bit, apply glue to the front and back edges. Pop that back down and attach the front and back pieces, bringing the whole thing into a square. Press it together gently. Make sure the sides are flush with the sides of the front and back pieces. You can bring in your spare pieces of strip wood again. Just press that carefully together. And once again, just push that gently along your work surface, and that can be left to dry. And then, because we're going to be painting that black and the bases of the sponge pads, if you cut those pieces as well, and they measure 16mm by 8mm, and I'm making 2 of them, and in inches that's 5/8 of an inch by 5/16 of an inch. So you need to paint those black on both sides and around the edges. And then for the handle we're going to use a cocktail stick, so start by snipping off the pointed end until you get to a nice straight bit, and it helps to sort of roll that along your worktop like that. Again, I'm doing the 2, so I'm doing 2 separate cocktail sticks, and we just want a straight end like that for the actual end of the handle, so you'll need to paint that bit as well. When your little paint tray has dried completely, you can sand it on all edges, so have the sandpaper flat on your worktop and sand in small circular motions, top and bottom and on the sides as well, so you've got a nice flush box piece. And then take a piece of fine grade sandpaper, and we just want to round over each of these edges. So just holding the paper at a 45-degree angle, just go along the inside edge of each piece and the outside edge as well, and then we'll get that rounded look. And then you can sort of round off the corners as well. Just sweep the paper from sort of front to back, and then that piece is ready to be painted. To do that, I'm using this matte black emulsion, and it's starting to go a little bit dry, so I've just added a tiny little bit of water in there and stirred that in. That's just a good way of getting a little bit more use out of them. So we only need sort of 14mm at the top of the cocktail stick, but you can go obviously a bit further down than that. Make sure you get paint on that end as well, because that's the end of our handle, and then you can just pop that into a sponge to dry. Black paint has now dried, so we're going to make the little paint pad. And to make the sponge part, I'm using this makeup wedge sponge. So cut the end off so that you get to sort of the thickness of the pad or the piece of wood. So about there. So you want to cut that much of the tip off, or the thinner part of the sponge. Like that. And then you want to cut it there again so you've got a nice thin strip of sponge. And try and keep it even, but don't worry if it's not. And because it's a slightly thicker sponge, it keeps its shape better than like the washing up sponges or bath sponges. And then just lay it onto the piece of wood, that way, and then snip off the overhang, like that, and then you can glue it into place. So apply glue to the wood. Stick down the sponge, press it on, and just pop that there to dry. I'll keep all these little tiny bits of sponge, they might come in handy for other projects. And then take your craft knife and you want to cut the cocktail stick to about 15mm long. So the handle will be 14, but we're cutting it just a little bit longer. So hold it against the rule there to get the measurement, and then you can roll it along. And then that extra millimetre that we cut, you want to cut into a 45-degree angle. So snip down like that. And then we're just going to glue that to the back of the pad. It's a really nice, simple little project. And then just stick it in the centre by eye, press it down, and then that can be left to dry. Okay, so I've got my little paint tray here, and I've brought in my selection of paints again. And this time I'm just using brushes to apply the paint. And I'm going to start with this lovely blue. And I want to start by applying some in the bottom of the paint tray. And I'm just dabbing it in there quite heavily. These people are fairly messy. They've done some painting and they haven't bothered cleaning out the tray. Dab a bit over the side. And then I want to take one of the little sponge pads. I'm just going to apply some to the actual sponge as well. And that can just sort of sit in there. It might be a little bit on the pad. Maybe they've got a little bit up the handle. So just really messy. And just put that there for a moment. Move it out of the way. And then on this other one I want to put a bit of the pink paint. And again, this is where they haven't cleaned off the pads. It's all just been chucked back in the shed. Sort on the handle there. I'll just sort of prop that onto that plastic pot to dry off. So while those pieces are drying off, I've just brought the unit back in, and I've made a few more bits and pieces to stick on there. Some polyfiller, tin of wood dye, some varnish and a larger tin of varnish there, and these are all things that I've made in the Craft Shed series. I think it's called accessories, but like I say, I'll link to the playlist for all of those videos below. And I'm going to stick these on top of here, but first of all I just want to put this old piece of newspaper on top. And I've taken that drawer out because I want that drawer to be open. I'm going to have some string hanging out of it. But I just want to display this on here. That way round, I think I tried it first. So I want it to cover sort of most of the top. So always sort of have a look first, see where you want it positioned, and then you could sort of make some creases in it, like that. So I'll have it there like that. So I'm going to apply glue to the back of the paper. Like that. And then follow my sort of creases to get that back where I wanted it. Like that. Stick it right down the back of the unit. Edge as well. Rumple it a little bit before the glue dries. Put some creases in there as well. And then I'm going to stick these things over in that corner. Actually, I'll start at the front. So when you're sort of doing a display, always think about having the smaller pieces at the front. And then these should be dry by now. And that, with the paint in there, should have sort of stuck itself into place, which it has. I want that on there, and obviously it'll have to be lined up with the back, but I'm going to have it hanging over the front edge a bit. So it can go like that, and then I've got a little bit more space at the back there. I can make some more pieces to go on there. Apply glue to the bottom. I'm just making sure on my finger that it's not hanging over the back. And then this little pad that I've covered in the pink paint, I want it to stand on there, but I want it to look like somebody's been sort of rubbing it onto the newspaper. So I'm going to add a bit more pink paint to the newspaper. Like that. And then I am actually going to apply a little bit of glue to the sponge pad there, just in the middle. And again, I don't want that handle sort of hanging too far over that back edge. So I'm going to stick that there like that. I'll just use the end of my paintbrush just to push that down. I don't want to touch the handle. Like that. So I just sort of dried the unit back in place, and this handle was hitting the wall. So I turned it around, the glue hadn't dried. So always sort of make sure that things will actually fit where you want them to. So just apply a little bit more glue and then have it with the handle facing that way. Press that down again. And actually I prefer it with the handle facing that way as well. It doesn't look quite so uniform facing the opposite direction. So I've got just a little length of waxed cord here that I'm just going to make a little ball of string with, and I want it hanging out of that drawer. Yep, so apply some glue to the sort of wound up piece of string. I'm going to stick this into the bottom of the drawer. Apply a bit of glue to the string. Use a cocktail stick to sort of press it into place. Something like that. So let's lift up that bit of paper and try that in there. What I'm going to do is actually tear that bit of paper like that, and then part of it can go inside the drawer and part of it can hang out like that. And then I'll just stick that bit of paper down as well. To make the paintbrush, cut a piece of 1.5mm thick sheet wood, that's 1/16 of an inch, 13mm by 5mm, and that's 33/64 of an inch by 13/64 of an inch. And then turn it lengthways and make a little pencil mark 5mm or 13/64 of an inch from the top edge. Same on the other side, join those up, and then turn it back upright like that, make a little pencil mark in the centre and the same at the bottom. And then you want to do a little pencil mark 1mm to either side of that central mark. So this will be for our handle, which will be 2mm or 5/64 of an inch thick. So do that like that, and then take a dressmaking pin and you want to make a little hole, probably about 1mm up from the bottom. So just ease that through the wood, and it doesn't have to go all the way through, but this will be the front of our paintbrush. So I'm not going all the way through there, it's probably just touching the other side of the wood. Okay, and then take your craft knife, and you'll need a new blade in for this, you want it to be nice and sharp, and you want to cut across that line we made 5mm from the top, just to the little pencil mark that we made for our handle. So to the first mark there, and always cut against the direction of the grain first, otherwise the wood will split. Same on the other side, like that, and then you can go in and cut in the direction of the grain, and you're just cutting away that strip at either side of what will become our handle, like that. And that will come away like that, and then the same the other side, and you should be able to do that in one nice cut like that. I've got a bit of an angle there, so I'm just going to go in and straighten that off. Get rid of those pieces, and then you want to just cut away a tiny little corner at the bottom of the handle to either side of the little hole we made. Just snip that off like that. And then bring in your fine grade sandpaper. I've got a newer piece there. and you just need to be really, really gentle with this, and we just want to round off all edges. So I'm just doing that really, really lightly, holding it at a 45-degree angle against the sandpaper and just sanding really gently along there. Support it with your finger and do the same at the tip of the handle. Along the other side as well. And we're basically just rounding everything off. Go from front to back as well, but the important thing is just to be gentle. You just need to sand it for a little longer. Sand away the pencil marks at the same time. And then these corners, we want to round those off as well. Round over the side of the brush. And it's all this sort of rounding off and shaping that really makes it look as it should. You just want to keep working away at it until you've got a really nice even shape. I need to do a little bit more on that side now. Like that. So now we've got our basic sort of paintbrush shape. So now we can add the bristles, and for that I'm using this old paintbrush, and it's not a very good one. It used to sort of shed bristles as I was using it, and I've also used it for glue, so the bristles have gone quite hard. Now you can see I've already made one paintbrush, and I snipped away the bristles there. So now I'm going to do the next lot of bristles, and just sort of lay the little paintbrush you've just made along the bristles like that to see how much you need to cut off. So you don't want to go all the way across, because you can use this for another project. So pop that down there and that, and have a little bit of glue ready. Tiny bit like that. And your cocktail stick as well. So take hold of the bristles nice and firmly and cut along as far as you need to. I'll just check I've got enough there. Yeah, and then keeping hold of those in those two fingers, hold the brush in another two fingers and apply a little bit of glue to the end. Like that. And then you can swap hands, and with the front of your brush facing you, attach the bristles to the end. And press them quite firmly together, and I'm pinching the bristles underneath my thumbnail there really tightly so that they're staying in a nice thin strip. And hold it together as the glue begins to take, and I'm pressing both the handle and the bristles together quite firmly. And then you can let go of your handle and you can see that they're joined. but just be really careful with it. And then be careful that you haven't got any glue on your thumb, or you'll take the bristles with it. So like that. And then I like to just lay that down on the edge of something. So I'm just going to lay it down on the edge of that eraser, like that. And then for the foil part, I'm actually using the foil from a chocolate coin, and it's a little bit thicker than tin foil, but not as thick as my finest aluminium sheet. And the aluminium sheet I tried, I couldn't get it to wrap round neatly, but I did want something a little bit thicker than tin foil. So the inside of these gold coins is that lovely silver that we want. So flatten it out with your finger so that you get rid of the sort of embossed patterns on there. And then you want to cut a piece that is 3mm or 1/8 of an inch thick by 15mm or 19/32 of an inch long. You can just measure that out. And if you haven't got an actual chocolate coin wrapper, you could use a chocolate wrapper, or a lot of sort of biscuits come in sort of foil wrapping, but of course you can use tin foil if you haven't got anything else, but a thicker one is preferable. So snip so you've got a nice straight end to go from, and you can measure for your 15mm. 15mm and 19/32 of an inch. Like that. I'll keep these other little gold bits, again, future projects. And then apply glue. Let me just get these things out of the way. I feel like I'm getting into a bit of a mess. So apply glue to the gold bit, or the back of it. And then bring in your brush and make sure you've got the right side. The right side should be facing down, and you want to lay it across the foil so that probably about 1mm of the bristles are onto the foil. So we want a little bit of the bristle to be covered. You see that there, and then press it down, all the while being really careful, make sure it's straight, and then bring the foil round. And if you want to use a cocktail stick, you might find that's a bit easier. Press it down with the cocktail stick and pull it sort of tight as well. Smooth it along like that. If you've got any overhanging sort of beyond the bristles this side, you can just snip it off. And then pull up this other side, again keeping it nice and tight, and then pull the sort of foil so that it's straight with the other one, flush with the other one. Like that. Turn the brush over, and this is your front, remember. So move that foil if you need to. And then take your dressmaking pen again, and then I just like to create a little bit of a pattern on the foil. So I'm just going to do a row of little dots along the bottom, and take them around that side as well. And you can go around the back if you think that that will be seen in your display. Mine won't because it's going to be laid down. And then a little row of dots around that top bit as well. And just be extra careful on that bit because you haven't got the wood to sort of stick the pin into. It'll just be going straight through into the bristles. So just nice and gently. I'll just do a couple at each side. And then I just like to do a little circle or oval in the middle there. And if you look at paintbrushes, they normally have some sort of maker's mark on the front or something like that. And just a little oval, little circle will do the trick, maybe a few dots in the middle. And then our bristles will be longer than we need them. So I'm going to trim them to about 5mm. So bring your scissors back in, and you can do that by eye or lay it alongside your rule if you'd rather. And just trim straight across in one snip. And there's the completed brush. And I made another one of these earlier. And I've gone, I sort of measured a brush that we've just bought to do our bathroom with, and it was called a 60mm brush, and I think that's the width of the bristles. So this is the sort of 12th scale version of that, but you can make brushes in any size. They could be a lot smaller than this, a lot larger. You'd have the sort of really big paste brushes that could be up to sort of, I don't know, ½ an inch wide, so 12mm wide. And obviously you could use a bit of 2.5mm thick wood for those. You can stain the handles, do different coloured bristles. For the bristles as well, you don't have to use paint brushes. You could use makeup brushes, any sort of old makeup brushes you've got lying around. And just sort of start trying to keep little oddments and things that you come across. I try not to throw anything away. I always sort of look at things with a view to what could I make out of them. And it's little things like this, like with the chocolate coin wrappers and things like that, and old paintbrushes that you otherwise might just throw away, that really come in handy for things like this. So I've got a couple of brushes there, and I'm going to use one of them on the unit now. So let me bring the unit back in. So I want to have the paintbrush sort of laid on the end here, maybe propped up against the pad, and again as if somebody's tried to wipe the excess paint off onto the newspaper. So I'm going to bring in that lovely greeny yellow paint and use that, and I'll just use my little paintbrush and just do a bit of the yellow paint on there. I've been trying to wipe it off all around there. And then what you can do as well is just dip the actual little paintbrush into the paint. I'm just taking it off of the top of that brush there. And these are messy people, remember, so they've probably got it all up the brush and maybe a bit on the actual wooden part. I like that propped up against that pad, so I'm actually going to glue that into place. I've got a little bit of glue left there. I also just want to get my tweezers to hold on to that brush. I'm going to apply some glue to the back. I hope you'll have a go at these brushes. It is like a fiddly little miniature to make, but I just think they look so good. I'm going to stick that there like that. I'm just pressing it down as well with my tweezers. And then I've got some spaces left here and over on this corner, and I've made a little kitchen towel, and I'm going to stick that into place on this side. And I've sort of torn off the end and ruffled it over, so I want that part showing. I'm going to put that there so I've still got a little bit of space left, because I'd like to do some more pots and jars with brushes in. Maybe a jar of white spirit that's had a brush left in it. So I want to dot a few more things around, but for this tutorial I think I'm going to leave it here, because I feel it's been a bit of a long one again. And then when I do the little shelf to go above this, we'll do the extra brushes and the little pots, and we'll fill this unit up a bit more. Okay, so I'm going to bring the shed back in and we'll pop that back into place. So that will go back over there. And I'll be doing that little shelf to go along here. But because every time I move this shed everything's falling over, so what I want to do is maybe a little interim video, and I want to fill up underneath this unit along here, add some more bits in there, and then I can glue this ladder into place and glue all the bits of wood into place, and then I can come back to this shelf and then work along the worktop and the rest of the shed. So I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Again, it's been a bit of a long one, I know, but we did make lots of little bits, and I think that corner of the shed is looking really good now. If you enjoy making your own doll's house miniatures, you might enjoy my book, Making Doll's House Miniatures in 1/12 scale. There's over 50 projects, all set out in easy to follow step-by-step tutorials. The book, along with my other 3, is available to purchase from Amazon. Just search for Julie Warren. And for now, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.